I woke up from a 6-hour emergency spinal surgery with a haze of anesthesia clouding my brain and a nurse holding my hand, only to find out that while I was under the knife, my own parents had sold my $425,000 condo right out from under me. They didn't just list it. They had used a forged power of attorney to sign away the only home I'd ever known, thinking they were finally teaching me a lesson about sharing my wealth with the family. What they didn't realize, what they couldn't have possibly known because I kept my private life a fortress, was that the condo wasn't my only property, and their greed was about to trigger a legal landslide that would bury them for good. Was I wrong for calling the police on my own mother and father while I was still wearing a hospital gown? Or would you have done the exact same thing if the people who raised you tried to leave you homeless and penniless during the most vulnerable moment of your life? Please tell me if I'm the villain here, because right now, I'm just the guy who lost a home and gained a criminal case against his own blood. To understand how we got to this point, you have to understand the dynamic of the Miller family. I'm 32 years old, and for the last decade, I've been the lucky one. I worked my tail off in high-frequency trading, pulling 18-hour days and living on caffeine and spite while my younger brother, Leo, and my older sister, Sarah, took a more relaxed approach to life. Leo is 30 and has found himself about 6 different times in 6 different career paths, all funded by my parents. Sarah is 35, has 3 kids, and a husband who treats employment like a hobby rather than a necessity. My parents, Robert and Diane, are your typical suburban couple who believe that family is everything, which in their language translates to whoever has the most money needs to spread it around until everyone is equally comfortable. I bought my condo in the city 5 years ago. It was a beautiful 2-bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the skyline that made every stressful minute at the office feel worth it. Because I knew my family's penchant for asking for handouts, I told them I was renting it. I told them the landlord was a strict guy I knew from college. It was the only way to keep them from moving into the spare bedroom or asking why I wasn't paying for Sarah's kids' private school tuition. The lie worked for years. I lived my life, built my savings, and even managed to diversify my investments. 2 years ago, I bought a second property, a modest but sturdy 3-bedroom house about 2 hours away in a quiet coastal town. I intended it to be a rental property or a retirement spot, but for now, it just sat there, managed by a local firm, a secret asset that nobody in my life knew about. My parents, meanwhile, were struggling. My dad's small business was failing, and instead of downsizing their lifestyle, they started looking at me as their personal bank account. The pressure started small, asking for help with a bridge loan or suggesting I pay for the family's Thanksgiving cruise. I always said no, citing my high rent and unstable job market. I thought I was safe. Then, 3 weeks ago, my back finally gave out. Years of hunched shoulders and stress culminated in a herniated disc that shifted so badly it began compressing my nerves. I was losing feeling in my left leg, and the doctors told me if I didn't get surgery immediately, I was looking at permanent nerve damage or paralysis. In a moment of weakness and genuine fear, I called my mother. I needed someone to drive me to the hospital and look after my place for a few days while I recovered. I gave her my spare key, thinking I could trust my own mother during a medical crisis. I told her I'd be in surgery for several hours and then in a drug-induced fog for at least a day. That was her window. Apparently, my parents had been snooping. While I was being prepped for the OR, they went into my home office. They weren't looking for a change of clothes. They were looking for financial statements. They found the deed to the condo. They found out I hadn't been renting for 5 years. I owned the place outright. The fury they felt at being lied to about my wealth combined with their own desperate financial situation created a perfect storm of entitlement. My mother later told the police she felt betrayed, and that selling the condo was just her way of reclaiming the family's fair share. They had a friend, a shady notary who owed my dad a favor, and they managed to whip up a fraudulent power of attorney claiming I had authorized the sale due to my incapacitation. They had already been talking to a cash-for-houses investor who had been pestering the neighborhood. They accepted a lowball offer of $380,000 just to close the deal instantly. While I was under anesthesia, dreaming of a life without back pain, my parents were literally handing over the keys to a stranger and moving my belongings into a storage unit they'd rented in my name. When I finally drifted back into consciousness the next morning, my phone was blowing up with alerts from my bank and my security system. A large deposit had hit my secondary savings account, the one they'd found the routing number for in my files, and my Nest camera showed strangers walking through my living room with clipboards. I called my mom, my voice raspy from the intubation tube, asking what the hell was going on. She didn't even sound guilty. She sounded proud. She told me, "Honey, we took care of the condo. You don't have to worry about that big mortgage or the upkeep anymore. We sold it to a nice investor. We took a small consulting fee for the trouble, and the rest is in your account. You can come stay in your old bedroom at our house once you're discharged. It's better this way. We're a family again." I felt the blood go cold in my veins. They hadn't just moved my stuff. They had liquidated my life's biggest investment without my consent while I was literally unable to walk. I sat there in that hospital bed, staring at the sterile white ceiling, feeling the heavy ache in my spine and the even heavier weight of realization. My own parents had looked at my unconscious body and seen a payday. They thought they had me trapped. They thought that by selling my home, they were forcing me back into their nest where they could control me and my finances. They had no idea about the coastal house. They had no idea that I had a digital trail of every single login and document they'd touched. I had to make a choice right then and there. I could play along, move back home, and try to slowly recover my money through civil courts while maintaining the peace, or I could burn the whole bridge down while they were still standing on it. I knew that if I didn't act fast, that money would start disappearing into Sarah's mortgage and Leo's latest business venture. So that is the nightmare I found myself in, staring at a phone screen that told me I no longer had a home to go back to. Before I tell you the absolute nuclear option I chose and how I used my secret second house to disappear, I want you to pause. Look at the situation from a distance. If your parents, the people who gave you life, sold your home while you were in surgery because they thought you owed them, what would you do? Would you call the cops and risk sending your father to prison, or would you try to handle it in the house? Go down to the comments right now and let me know, because I need to know if my next move was as justified as it felt at the time. I didn't call my mom back. I called my lawyer, and then I called the police. I told the officer on the line that my home had been broken into and my property title had been fraudulently transferred. Within an hour, a detective was at my hospital bedside. I showed him the deed, the fake power of attorney that I clearly hadn't signed, since I was literally in an operating room at the time of the signing, and the security footage of my parents letting the buyers in. The detective looked sickened. He asked me twice if I was sure I wanted to press charges against my parents. I didn't hesitate. I said, "They didn't hesitate to rob me while I was under anesthesia. Don't hesitate to do your job." The fallout was immediate and chaotic. While the police were heading to my parents' house, I used my laptop to freeze every account I had. I contacted the title company and the buyer's agent, informing them that the sale was fraudulent and that a police report had been filed. The buyer, as it turned out, was part of a semi-legit investment group that panicked the moment they heard the word fraud. They pulled back, but the legal mess of the sold condo was going to take months to untangle. My parents were arrested that evening. My sister, Sarah, called me screaming, calling me a heartless monster, and asking how I could let my father sit in a cell over a little bit of real estate. She actually said, "It's just a house, but they're your parents." I hung up and blocked her. I blocked Leo. I blocked everyone. 3 days later, I was discharged. I couldn't go back to the condo because the locks had been changed by the buyers, and the whole thing was a crime scene of litigation. But I didn't go to my parents' house like they expected. I didn't go to a hotel. I called a private medical transport car and had them drive me 2 hours away to my secret coastal house. When I arrived, the air was salty and the street was silent. No one knew I was there. I spent the next month recovering in total isolation, watching the drama unfold through legal emails. My parents were facing felony charges for identity theft, forgery, and grand larceny. Because the amount was over $400,000, the stakes were incredibly high. My dad tried to claim that I had given him verbal permission, but the hospital records and the timeline of my surgery made that a physical impossibility. The most satisfying part, though, was the civil suit. I didn't just want them to face criminal charges. I wanted every penny back. I sued my parents and the notary who helped them. It turned out my parents had already gifted $50,000 of the sale money to Sarah to pay off her credit cards and $20,000 to Leo for a startup. When the court froze their assets, they had nothing. Sarah had to sell her car to try and pay back the money she'd received, which she's now blaming me for. The consulting fee my parents took, gone, used for their initial bail and legal defense. In the end, the sale of the condo was voided due to the fraud, but because of the damage done and the legal fees, I ended up selling it anyway once the title was cleared. I didn't want to live in a place that felt like a betrayal. I moved into my coastal house permanently, upgraded the security, and changed my phone number. My parents ended up taking a plea deal. They avoided heavy prison time but have a permanent felony record and a massive restitution order that they will be paying off for the rest of their lives. They lost their own house to cover the legal debts and the returned funds to the investor. They are now living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, ironically the same kind of life they were trying to save me from. My siblings don't speak to me, and they tell everyone in our hometown that I'm a cold-blooded sociopath who put his parents in the gutter for a misunderstanding. But every morning, I wake up in my house by the sea, my back is healing, and for the first time in my life, I don't feel like a piggy bank. I feel like a man who finally set a boundary that no one can cross. At the end of the day, family isn't a license to steal, and being related to someone doesn't give them a claim to your hard work. I lost my family, but I kept my soul and my future. If you think I did the right thing by holding them accountable, or if you think I should have been more forgiving, I want to hear it. This experience taught me that sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from the most. Like this video if you were on my side and think that blood doesn't justify betrayal. Subscribe for more stories like this where the good child finally bites back, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far, or did they get exactly what they deserved? I'll see you all in the next story.